Welcome to Poets in the Conversation Room. I'm Grace Cavalieri, co-host of this event with my co-producer, Kimberly Taylor, who's the co-publisher of Annapolis Home Magazine, which is the most beautiful magazine on the East Coast, truly. And she's a poet as well. So Kimberly and I came to St. John's last year. This is our second season. And we pitched them by telling them that Annapolis had every art, dance, theater, the visual arts preeminently, and everything you could want, but they did not have a place for poetry. So they gave us a room in their house, and it's a perfect room we bring the most popular poets in America, and it's something Annapolis is so grateful for. We are thankful to Frank Rousum for making both series possible, and Lynn Persegian, who made this particular program possible. And we're thankful to Susie Parker, the president, and Melinda Rooney, who will be ahead of the book signing. And although it's a beautiful spring day, the people who really love poetry are here, and everyone who is here has told me they know Bob's work. So I'm going to turn it over to Kimberly, and just to let you know the format, Bob Hickok will read, then we'll distribute his poem for discussion, then he'll have a book signing across the quad. And here's my mischief maker, my partner in mischief, Kimberly. Just back from India.
Thank you. Thank
Look at the
you.
earrings.
It is so fabulous to see everybody here today. Thank you so much for coming out. And I can't wait to tell you about Bob Hickok. Bob has 11 collections of poetry, most recently, Water Look Away by Copper Canyon Press, which, by the way, is an incredibly respected press in the world and in the world of poetry. It's just outstanding. He's a two-time finalist for the National Books Critics Circle and has also been awarded a Guggenheim Fellowship, 2 National Endowment for the Arts Fellowships, and 8 Pushcart Prizes. His poems have been selected for inclusion in 9 volumes of the Best American Poetry. Well, Bob's poetry never fails to move me. I find his work a careful balance of restraint and revelation, and in his work, I find an unflinching look at the ordinary and even dreadful things in our lives that, when the poem is over, suddenly seems beautiful, sparkling, and lovable. I most appreciate as well his sense of humor. In an interview with the journal Gulf Coast, he was asked, "What would Bob Hickok shoot out of a giant slingshot?" And he answered, "Bob Hickok." Without further ado, I welcome Bob Hickok. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I wish I were in that slingshot now. This first poem is called Speaking American. When he learned I'm a poet, he asked if I knew this other poet. We don't all know each other, I told him. After he informed me she likes cheese similes. Love is like cheese, time is like cheese, cheese is surprisingly like cheese. Then I said, I know this poet, and he went, see? He went, see means he said see, but you know that if you're American and alive. I explained that I know this poet means I know her work. When he was like, work? When he was like is like he went, which is past tense of he goes, in case you're from another country and confused by our lack of roundabouts. But poetry isn't work, he said, unless you're talking about reading it. But I'm not talking about reading it. I went in a moment that was the future past of everything I'd do from then on, such as snag the last of the hyacinth cookies and step onto the veranda to be awed by stars. Where I went, it's hard work to be awed by stars. They're just little lights about which we learn a song as children. And he was like, but I do wonder what they are, as both of us lifted our heads like birds, waiting for our mothers to throw up in our mouths. When I shared the image, he was like, gross. But then he went, you're right. That's what we do. We expect the sky to feed us. This led to a long discussion about yearning, in which the word yearning never appeared, in which he went and I went, and he was like and I was like, and the stars kept doing what the song says they do. Because burn your hydrogen, little star, doesn't fit the diatonic harmony that pivots on an opposition between tonic and dominant, and a tune derived from ah, vous direz je m'aime. Then a woman came out wearing a red dress the size of a whisper, lit a smoke, and the smoke acted all floaty and sexy and better than us. And she was like, want one? And we were like, yes. Not a true story. Which I didn't realize is the title of the next poem, True Story. I have to say, I heard someone playing piano down the hall. I think we all made the wrong choice. True story. I can't escape the possibility I was meant to own a Zamboni, but got stuck with 3 can openers instead. Or that I should have kissed your knees last night when you got home from being with your friend who just had her cat killed. I know I'm supposed to write, put to sleep, but can she wake her up now? No. And it was kind of you to rush over right after work, and you deserved praise in some form, and your knees don't get enough attention, I guess I'm saying. Where would we have gone on the Zamboni? Dunno. But how is certain? Slowly. Here's a headline you never have to worry about. 3 Canadians killed in Zamboni drag racing accident. I'd buy a newspaper to tell the world how much I love you. Tons, gee-gobs. And how many cats have we cried over so far? 4 and 1 dog, and soon we'll start adding parents to that list. Then one of us will look at empty chairs around the house and hate them. So knees, elbows, hair, and of course the more famous bits. I kiss thee in life and in poems, which are not life, more like a flashlight turned on in a black hole. Gee-gobs is a lot. Gee-gobs squared is more accurate. But is amount really the correct measure of love? I love you greenly, gymnastically, variously, and stradivariously. I love you with my heart shadow and my brain fog and my suitcase packing skills. The suitcase I'm packing for when you go to the next room and I have to follow. Poor kitty, poor friend, poor us, who have to deal with mortality using a limited toolkit. There's crying, drinking, toking, injecting, breaking dishes and popsicle sticks, and loving longer and softer those who remain. How long ago did there cease to be a time I can remember being without you? 1897, I think, the year the jumping jack was invented, the year levitating was added to the Olympics, the year I first dreamed I was alive and saw you coming around the corner and thought, so this is the famous happiness I've heard so much about. That's you. Everyone turn to my wife and embarrass her. This is called the Big Book of Therapy. If you think of humans as rare as snowflakes, your world is constantly melting. If you think of humans as essential to keeping dogs happy, someone will always want to buy you a beer. a treatise, though not a treat. Sorry. Democracy's in trouble. Some people love the idea of the strong man, a man who can bench press taxis, who'll break necks, murder red tape, who knows in his bones what needs to be done and can do it through the strength of his toes alone, his hair, his savoir-faire. But I love the idea of the wrong man and woman that we all are, not all of the time, but all of most of the time, and need to gather our wrongness into a pile, a sheath, whatever gathery thing makes sense to you, and work together to get our boats across the lake or dirigible to the promised land as best we can. Frailty, determination, a little Tabasco, a little love, shoulders to the boulder or wind or wheel. That's the recipe our floundering fathers intended, who knew a crapshoot of a government when they invented one. Many of us give up a little on life, give up a lot, when we realize it's a ton of work to be or have or wear this flesh and grow ever less alive, ever more likely to make someone else responsible for all the work and miracles we need to get done. So when deciding who to vote for, I considered the following write-in candidates: the exclamation mark, Lincoln's hat, a better man than the current contenders, the moon who'd commute to the job, that cloud over there, the one that looks like Mozart eating a peach, the sun and the spring it brings, the flowers, birds, and bees and stings, the blooms and rain and muck. But then I remembered democracy's a timeshare, a spiritual dare, a call to pick up a shovel and dig in, and by digging, make a hole whole, and wrote down the hard truth of it. Everyone. You're squinting. This is called The Gift. My wife gave me a tie made of the thread of life. I was afraid to wear a tie made of the thread of life, that it would snag, that I'd spill coffee on it. But I wore it, and every person who looked at it saw something different. One a waterfall, one a lava flow, one a forest primeval. Coming home, I took it off and forgot it on the bus. When I told my wife, she laughed and said, "Did you really think I'd give you a tie made of the thread of life? That was a tie made of silk, which is the memory of cocoons, which are wombs you were wearing birth." I told her her thoughts are the happy childhood I didn't have. The sun was in her hair, where it stayed until she combed it out that night. I know I'm supposed to talk between poems, but I don't have anything else I want to say. This is called Obad. Pussy sounds like porn or a 12-year-old boy trying to act 15. Vagina only feels right if I wear a doctor's smock and make people wait in a room with ancient magazines. Recombining them, Pusina seems a princess or former Soviet bloc country. Vajussi, something vegans put on the table, when you, to be polite, pretend you're crazy concerned about your health and have a full bowl. I've tried addressing it as ma'am or your secretiveness. Really, it reminds me of dawn, of dew when I go down on the lawn. Do you do that? Get on your knees around 6 a.m. and lick the shit out of the world? All that gratitude for something soft and moist. Birdsong, a halo around your head and tongue. The sun trying to hold everything in its arms. I want to have sex right now in this poem with the universe. While physically that's ambitious, emotionally I'm just getting started being a man. Probably the most interesting reading series I ever participated in. It's called the Silo City Reading Series. You read in an empty silo. This is in Buffalo.
Is that what this feels like?
Far less echoey. And the night that I read there, it was just thunderstorming like crazy. And they were having all kinds of problems with the microphones, with the sound system, which you really want them to fix in a silo when it's raining and a lot of the rain is coming in. And it's actually a horrible place to read.
What city is it?
Buffalo. Because when you read in a silo, basically as soon as you start reading, you pretty quickly hear your voice coming back at you. So it's terrible. I do not recommend it. But the people who put this on are wonderful. There's so much warmth involved in this series. That preface is about, actually, I just felt like saying that. It has nothing to do with the next poem. This poem is about a conversation I had after that reading, which a lot of this stuff ends up being made up. The conversation is true. And the poem very cleverly is titled Silo City. A Nigerian poet and I pinched together at a corner table, at a corner of a table in a Buffalo bar, trying to hear each other. A three-piece band is playing alt indie folk rock. The amplified sincerity hurts my spine. I've just read poems in an abandoned grain silo about 50 yards from the bar. After telling me where he was born and that he's a student at Syracuse, he mentions a fellow student, a young poet who'd been emailing me but stopped, adding, "Your work meant a great deal to him, and he killed himself." A sentence that pushes me out of the window of my head. New to America, new to death, he found the body. This is why his face has no moon or sun in it, no hawks or clouds, nothing that rises or glows or flies. Mostly he feels guilty. If he hadn't gone on a trip, if he'd paid closer attention, if he were God, that last one is me. We're aspiring to be a cave, our heads almost touching as I shout that he couldn't have known something was wrong and that suicides are often unplanned. The most vivid way to convey this is to explain that when I tried to kill myself, I had no intention to do so. Packing for a rafting trip, I put a rolled-up t-shirt in a duffel, turned around, walked into my parents' bedroom, grabbed several bottles of Valium, left the house, drove to a field, and swallowed my sudden desire for erasure. I'm screaming all of this against the sonic wall of a song about the end of love. I can't tell if he hears or understands me, if I hear or understand me, even though I'm close enough to see the complexity of his irises, the swirls and privacies of their color. My words are daisies trying to stand up to a lawnmower. I sense that even if he heard me, it wouldn't matter. I'm pretty sure he's ash, or sticks thrown against a wall, or a Francis Bacon painting beaten up in an alley. Pretty sure I'd love to be a blanket or ladder or a leaf that's always green against his heart. Well, the impulse to help is stupid. The impulse not to is a metal spoon against a cavity. Now I feel guilty. I haven't shouted loud enough or grabbed his face and kissed the bruises out of his eyes or chewed down to his brain and licked it. Haven't proven the value of language to reach and assuage. Over and over, the singer has a broken heart. Is this all we do? Try to connect and fail. There's no way to keep this up. The band's attempt to lasso tumult is killing me. I have to go. I have a life that isn't this, isn't Buffalo, isn't his friend's decision to find out what happens after pizza and blue water and not having the right words for our jealousy of light. I don't even know his name, yet I'm convinced that I'm abandoning him as I walk away, that this is a practice betrayal for all the betrayals to come, of flesh and the earth, and that every time I close my eyes, I kill the sky that lives there. I decide I'll write him a poem that cures solitude and send it to everyone but him, that I'll write everyone else a poem that cures arrogance and send it only to him, that I'll be ready to find a body or be a body that is found. I decide nothing. I walk out of the bar and become the cool air that touches my skin. I don't look back or forward or side to side. I am air. I look everywhere. I look nowhere at once. This is called Oh My Papa. Our fathers have formed a poetry workshop. They sit in a circle of disappointment over our fastballs and wives. We thought they didn't read our stuff, whole anthologies of poems that begin, "My father never," or those that end, "and he was silent as a carp," or those with middles which, if you think of the right side as a sketch, look like a paunch of beer and worry. But secretly, with flashlights in the woods, they've read every word and noticed that our 9 happy poems have balloons and sex and giraffes inside, but not one dad waving hello from the top of a hill at dusk. Theirs is the revenge school of poetry, with titles such as My Yellow Sheet Lad and Given Your Mother's Taste for Vodka, I'm Pretty Sure You're Not Mine. They're not trying to make the poems better so much as sharper or louder, more like a fishhook or electrocution. As a group, they overcome their individual senilities, their complete distaste for language, how cloying it is, how like tears it can be, and remember every mention of their long hours at the office or how tired they were when they came home, when they were dragged through the door by their shadows. I don't know why it's so hard to write a simple and kind poem to my father, who worked not like a dog. Dogs sleep most of the day in a ball of wanting to chase something, but like a man with 7 kids and a house to feed, whose absence was his presence, his present, the Cheerios, the Pia Flyers, who taught me things about trees, that they're the most intricate version of standing up, who built a grandfather clock with me so I would know that time is a constructed thing, a passing, ticking fancy, a bomb that'll go off soon for him, for me. And I notice in our father's poems a reciprocal dwelling on absence, that they wonder why we disappeared as soon as we got our licenses, why we wanted the rocket cars, as if running away from them to kiss girls who looked like mirrors of our mothers wasn't fast enough. And it turns out they did start to say something, to form the words hey or stay. But we turned into a door full of sun, into the burning leave, and were gone before it came to them that it was all right to shout, that they should have knocked us down with a hand on our shoulders, that they too are mystified by the distance men need in their love. This last poem is called The Call to Worship. The possibility that the zero gave birth to the universe, that all our somethings come from nothing, the fear of being alone like that, children of chance, orphans down to our atoms, is mother to the idea of God. God is a dress we slip over solitude, a mask for oblivion to wear, a rule giver in a world where no flower or bear cares that we are here or what we do. I prefer a theology of silence, the eschatology of the shrug, a religion of holding my wife's hand for now. But if the industry of the church is what it took to give me bells ringing Sunday mornings, to which crows sometimes rise and deer turn, I'm grateful for a sound that pulls me out of myself, lifts my head towards sun and clouds, into the up and all, the blue, the on and on of it. When I bend the only knee I have to bend, feel happily small, contingent, and held by what I can't say, short of everything. Thank you very much for listening. Do I just sit down?
Would you feel more comfortable sitting down?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's see.
You want to read it out loud?
Sure.
Let me get this chair over here.
I'll read it up here and then just sit down.
Then sit down?
Yeah, thank
Okay.
you. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Is that my ambition,
The eulogy I didn't give.
my ambition to be done with ambition?
Yes.
So the eulogy I didn't give. My ambition to be done with ambition suffered a setback at my father's funeral. When I wanted to say something profound that he would hear, that a tree could understand, that the wind would feel. But the only words I could come up with was a handful of dirt. The sound of it hitting his coffin, as if shouting at him, woke me up, and I took my clothes off and walked away, back into my life as his child, when all I wanted was to hold his hand. I am now fathered but fatherless, a being whose being can half be traced to a hole in the ground where my father's beard is and his bones. His beard will grow for a while down there, and his bones will never cast a shadow, and I'll always know where to go to look at his name cut in stone. Rain, with patience and the greed of love to hold, will slowly erase his name and everything it touches. It always sounds like a eulogy to me, the sky trying to figure out what to say about loss and making a mess of it like the rest of us.
He's here to answer any questions.
Any questions?
All questions.
All questions.
I'll start.
Go ahead, Michael.
So this is the eulogy I didn't give one. Is there a series of eulogies that you didn't give?
Yes. There's basically a book full of them. Can you all hear me without this thing? Yeah, there are about 100 of them, I guess. So, yeah. A lot of non-funerals, or non-eulogies. Yeah.
Once you said that you did not imagine the next line until it came to you, that you wrote very impulsively and instinctively. Could you talk about that a bit, how you trusted yourself to take such a, in fact, I think you said the only risk is not taking a chance. And talk about that a bit. That means everything to me.
There have to be other things that mean something to you,
Nothing
though.
more than that.
Different people write in different ways. And there are, a friend of mine, also a poet, he only writes when a kind of tension builds up and he feels he has no choice. I'm more of a basher. I write every day, almost never know what I'm going to write about. And because of that, I've come to think of poetry as performative. It is me trying to capture what is going on with my brain in the moment I'm writing. And so there's no sense of what is going to come next. That's a big part of why I do this. I want to see what comes next. So if I start a poem and I feel bored with it, I just chuck that. It's not interesting enough to me sitting there writing it. So there's just no reason to do that. It's not getting at something that's actually on my mind. So.
Yeah, so in a couple of poems, sorry, thanks. In a couple of poems you read before, you know, one of the things that always struck me about your poetry are these images that are unexpected but make sense once you absorb them. Like, you know, running for president should be a cloud that looks like Mozart eating a peach, and
That's actually in the Constitution, if you read it closely.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
My mistake. But when I guess what I'm curious about is in the act of writing, does an image like that pop up, or do you go through several images that were crappy and settle on that one, or do you come up with Mozart and then you add the peach, or how does it work?
Both. It tends, when I was learning to write, and pretty much the whole time I wrote, I had a full-time job. So if I didn't complete a poem, I felt like shit until the next time I got a chance to write. So I think someone who's in that kind of situation or context, you learn to complete things. If you need that sense of completion to feel good about whatever you're doing. Glad I wasn't a filmmaker, that actually wouldn't work. So I learned to write quickly and to edit as I wrote. So I will just write a bit and then go back and read, go back and read. And when I like what I have, I move on. So there certainly are plenty of times when I may start with an image and I just hate it, think it's stupid, whatever. I just delete it and try again. But more often than not, particularly at 66, I've been writing for over 40 years. I write every day. So someone who has done something like that, if you're a plumber and you've fixed sinks every day, you get pretty quick at it. And one of the things that I think comes with any art, whether it's this kind of art or plumbing that you've done over and over, you anticipate and see mistakes much earlier. You don't try to push something forward that you know isn't going to work. So at this point, by and large, if I write a poem, it's complete. And the decision then later is throw it out because I actually end up deciding it's crap, or I think it's good and I write another one.
Yeah, but the plumber doesn't use a different pipe for every job. You know, in poetry, you know, we're always trying to think of something that's, you know, hasn't been said before. You know.
Sure, but one of the things that's, I think, is crushing to most of us, if you look at most of our work, and you could do the same thing with mine, I'm not excluding myself from this, you're probably going to find a handful of concerns that get developed over and over, and there may be tremendous variation, but within that variation, you are probably going to find that this person tends to use this gauge pipe, this kind of valve, likes this kind of, you know, prefers these tools, doesn't like to solder, prefers using the, the stuff you can snap together. And that's one of the things I like about writing. You're trying to both rebel from habit and develop it. You're trying to be yourself and to be someone else, which is so much of the tension that I think we deal with as people.
What is a eulogy?
A eulogy is something that people say when someone has died. So at a funeral, people like to talk about how much the person meant to them. So a eulogy is a term for people offering that kind of expression.
Offering food?
No, well, sometimes. Like donuts? That's Anna. I know you like donuts. Then you finally got your donut today.
Thanks for carrying me.
Sure.
Hi. I wasn't expecting to be able to ask a question, so I'm going to try to form this properly and out
But
loud.
we're in the conversation room.
I know. I wish there were windows in here because it's such a beautiful day. But
I was kind of hoping people would talk during the poems. And another thing.
Okay. I've been thinking about masculinity and manhood in the context of my poems and how I feel like I write girl poems. And what I find interesting about this poem and others that you read, you talk about your father and like this generational understanding of manhood or masculinity. And I've been considering that in the context of the generations of women in my life, and the challenge it presents when their voice is not in the poem. And I feel that silence for women maybe of generations previous that I've never met, or, you know, the silence of your father in this piece. So I'm just curious if you could speak to that, because there's something in that for me. I don't know. It's not fully formed question, but
It's okay. So you sometimes while writing these, you feel like you actually want to hear a mother, a grandmother, you hear them in the poem.
right, it's a spiritual experience to write a poem about your family.
Yeah. Are you comfortable speaking for them? And I would give it a try, because they can't. They don't. They're not there writing the poem with you. And one of the things that people struggle with is that fear of speaking for others. But if you take on this work, that's one of the things that comes with doing it. There's a kind of arrogance to that, but there's also a kind of humility, feeling you can or need to speak for others who don't do this. I mean, to go back to the idea of plumbing, you don't probably feel bad. I don't know if you know plumbing. If you don't, you probably don't feel bad that you don't. You just call a plumber. If you're going to do this and you want to write a particular kind of poem, I think you want to just go ahead and do that. This sounds corny, but if you do it with love, odds are you are not going to say something inappropriate. You're not going to offend them. Most people feel good being drawn into these things.
Right, and you say write for them. Like a lot of people I know who are writing poetry will say writing about another person feels uncomfortable or something. But I like that framing. Yeah.
You will also, I mean, if these are people from your life, you are going to have an understanding of them and a take on them that, unless you hate them, and it'd be a different kind of poem, is going to be inherently warm and inherently honoring, even if it has some negative things. But I would say just let them in. The thing I like about you wanting to hear them in there, a lot of times, particularly people who are drawn to lyric work, are afraid to have narrative bits, afraid to have actual experiences or moments, or someone said this, someone did that. And it's the most effective way to embody people, is we know each other through actions, through things we do with each other, see each other do. So wanting to draw that speech, which is usually a moment in, seems really natural to me. Sure.
Well, to pick up on that, did you feel when you're writing a poem about a father, how much does it have to be your father, or are you creating a world where a fictional father is that you?
It depends on the poem. One of the things that was most helpful to me was coming to believe at a certain point that at a certain point in writing, what I want to do does not matter at all. My obligation is to serve the poem. Because I don't feel I steer these things. And that's separate from how I said I write. I don't know what I'm going to write about almost all the time. But once a course seems to have been taken, my obligation is to help the thing get wherever that is. And I usually don't know where that is. So there's an interesting trust that's involved. It's like, okay, the poem knows there's something here. The poem knows it wants to go somewhere. My obligation is to shepherd it, lead it, whatever, however you want to put that. So if there are bits of my father, whoever that are actual, great. If I have to make it up, great. I do not care. Because again, if it feels like it's honoring what I'm writing about, I don't worry that I'm going to overstep some bound. If the poem is authentic, what ends up in it should also be authentic as well, even if it's totally made up.
But to follow up on that, is you talk about the poem having a direction, but it seems like a lot of your poems, you're deliberately turning them to a different direction at a certain point.
Yeah, sports, you know how some running backs just go. Doesn't matter, there's a body in them or open space, it doesn't matter, they just go. Others, they kind of dance around, they look for an opening. For me, there is this dancing around that is going on in a poem. It's like, okay, kind of where is this going in terms of the real meat of it versus, say, the narrative or just how it feels. And there's usually a point where I think I realize that, and it's like, okay, let's go toward that thing, whatever it is. It's another way I think of it is kind of like a gear shift. You're going along in fourth, and all of a sudden, you take off, shift into fifth. You had.
Yeah, since you said this was part of a book of eulogies, I was wondering if you could just talk about sort of the experience or approach to writing a sequence of poems. Like, was this the first one that you wrote? At what point were you like, this is a series of poems, this is a book of poems, and I think this book is now like complete?
Yeah. For most of my books are just, it's a passage of time. I have a book that is just out. Supposed to answer questions about it for an interview. Like, how long did this book take you? It's like, it's 2 years. And it's not a book so much as 2 years passed. I had a pile of poems. I put them together. There have been times where I'll write a poem, and that was the first one. And there's just something about that poem that creates a sense of need to go back and say more. So with that, I had no intention of writing these, but I wrote the one, liked it, was interested, and just kept writing them. The book before the one I have that's just out, Water Look Away, was kind of the same thing. I wrote one poem about a friend whose wife had hung herself. He came home and found her hanging in the basement. She used an extension cord, and I wrote a poem about that. And that poem opens something up that, it was the weirdest thing. I don't remember how many days in a row I wrote. Started, finished, and I knew with the first one that I had more to say, and I knew with the last one that it was done. And I didn't change the order. I didn't change anything. That was it. So to me, kind of like with poems, a series just kind of arrives and announces itself and more or less announces when it's done. For a lot of contemporary poets, the notion of a book as project has sort of taken hold. And there is this assumption that books have to have this unifying theme. There has to be some question you're trying to answer or problem you're trying to solve. And I understand that to a certain degree, but I also think it's something that's become a kind of yoke that poets in particular don't need to wear. It kind of doesn't make sense. We're still supposed to be the flighty ones, the ones that just kind of go with the wind. Well, I feel this way, I feel that way. But there's something about, I think, academia in particular that has made poets feel they kind of, have to do that. I don't know if that you have noticed that or felt that, but
Yeah, I think that like the book project is very common now. But I guess the risk of it is, yeah, it's this sort of lack of surprise or
yeah, yeah.
sort of the risk would be sort of redundancy.
Yeah. Formal poets will talk about how they think form liberates them. It's like they don't feel straitjacketed by the sonnet. It's almost like someone, some of us like to be wrapped with something. It calms us down. For some people, the notion of a form or a project is actually liberating. And to me, if you're that kind of person, then project away. If you're not, though, it kind of hurts to see that some people feel, I saw this in students when I was teaching, they feel they have to do that even if it doesn't suit their personality, even if it doesn't suit their work. So, Anna?
Are you a poetry singer?
I like writing poetry. I don't know how much I like poetry itself, but I like writing it. Why do you like donuts so much?
Because they have a lot of sugar.
Good answer.
And hot chocolate. I like hot chocolate.
Yeah, you had a donut and then chocolate today.
Bob, what does research mean to you as a poet? For instance, in this poem, you say his beard will grow a while down. I imagine that's true that a beard grows for a while even when you're buried.
Yeah.
And you have other poems for this series in which you say stuff about preparing for the body and some scientific facts, so to speak. So how do you know these facts or come to these facts and add them to the poems?
Most of this stuff is just stuff I've heard or read through the years. I don't do that much research, but there are times when I've realized I've sort of written myself into a corner and I need to know something more about a topic, and then I'll go look into it. But I'm not a researcher. It isn't really required for what I do, thank God.
Just quick. It sounds like you never have writer's block, or is that a silly question?
No, although I am slightly superstitious, so I'm a little reluctant to answer that, but no, basically, I like the process so much that I think I learned pretty early that the best way around writer's block is to write. And not, for whatever reason, I've not been as burdened as I think a lot of us are or become about the product. The thing that kills people is they worry about the product. And I think because I like I don't like the product. I don't like my poems. One of the hardest things about reading is looking at these things and having to choose them because they drive me nuts. But I love writing. I love my poems while I'm making them. And I think that protects me from a lot of things. And writer's block, probably foremost.
Can you speak more about not liking poetry?
Oh God, I hate my poems. I can't stand my poems.
Or anyone else's?
No, like anything else, there's all kinds of poems that are just terrible. There are all kinds of movies that are terrible, all kinds of songs that are terrible. But there are tons of poems I love. I have an aversion to my own work that I'll never understand. I don't get it. But the great thing is it's really helpful because it makes me go back. It's like, eventually I hope I get this right. So it's horrible a lot of the times, just walking around feeling this way. But in terms of writing, it's part of what makes me really happy to go up and write.
And even looking back at your earlier books, you can come to them and say, oh, well, that was a very effective point in my work.
It's one of, Eve can attest to this. One of the most shocking things for me is to read one of my poems and like it. Probably the coolest experience for me is there have been times when somehow I've come across one of my poems and I haven't recognized it as one of my poems, and I like it. And I've written and published a lot, so that can happen, and I tend to forget that pretty quickly. But it's really rare. It is incredibly rare.
I'll defer to Grace. Well, I'm just wanting to stay on this for a little bit and try to understand.
So
a
why
little-
are you trying to torture me? I say I hate my poems, and you want me to talk about it?
My first thought was that there was something a tad disingenuous in what you were saying, and but there's also, I assume, something quite real in what you're saying. So I'm trying to understand if the dissatisfaction is some general sense of an inescapable inadequacy or something in your expression of what you're doing, but that's in conflict with what you've said before, that the poem knows where it's going, that the poem knows what it wants to say, and knows when it's done. So help.
That's easy to maybe clear up. That's in the live moment of the poem. That's when the poem is coming into existence.
Yeah.
And the flip side of this is I feel like a god when I write. I feel fucking invincible. I don't doubt myself. I don't think about the end product. It's when this way I feel about my poems is entirely absent. And I feel incredibly fluid and alive and just no worries, no problems. So that sense of the poem knowing, and that makes perfect sense to me. I think the abhorrence comes from a couple things. Part of it is, do you like hearing your voice? Most people I know do not like hearing their voice because we don't hear ourselves the way our voices actually sound. Just the mechanics, the fact that we're in our head. And I think that's part of it. Plus, I want poems to do everything. And anytime I look at, if I read a poem of mine that's a narrative, it's like, well, that's kind of boring. There's not much imagination there. If it's driven by imagination, I think, well, that's kind of stupid. And there's no real heart, there's no real story there. So there's this weird expectation that somehow every poem can achieve everything, which is stupid. But it's something that I feel. And the combination, I think, of encountering this reflection of myself, this recording of myself, along with that expectation, makes them endlessly unsatisfying.
Well, sort of to relate it to the poem that was just, it's as though is it as though you're saying the bones of your poem cast no shadow for you?
No. It's so weird that we've ended up talking so much about this.
No.
I have no sense of achievement from what
They
I've
don't
done.
stand up.
No, I don't think they do.
Bob, I feel that I understand exactly what you're saying by reading you, because you are so playful. You are just having fun every minute. You're just creating. You're just a magic man. Who wouldn't want to do that all day? But then at the end of the day, it's just a pile of Play-Doh, maybe, in your mind. But I believe that writer's block is a lack of ego energy, that you need a little kiss on the cheek or a praise, and that's the problem. But you don't have ego in your poems because you don't care. And I've heard David Gawanter say this, I've heard Tim Donohue say this, that they do not like their poems. I've heard many poets say that. So it's not unusual, and it's more that you just love the process.
I do.
Yes.
I do.
I'm on to you.
I do.
They always fall short.
Yeah.
Well, everyone says that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things I've really come to like to do is to work on our house. We live in Southwest Virginia, and we couldn't find people to work on our house, and we needed a lot of things done to our house, so I've learned to do it. If you do that, I mean, there's not a wall I've put up, a door I've put up, a floor I've put down, a window I've put in, that there isn't, even when I've done a really good job, there isn't some part of it that I notice that my wife never does, no one else ever does. Like, yeah, but that's crooked. If you go over there and touch the wall where I've mudded the drywall, yeah, you're going to notice a little indentation. I think it's part of our nature.
I read that you received an MFA, and I wonder if that messed up your poetry, helped your poetry, and what made you go for that MFA? Did you have a dye shop, a tool and die shop, or just wondering what your progression was and what you got out of the MFA?
The only reason I got the MFA, so I had been designing dyes, automotive dyes, for about 20 years.
Okay.
The business was dying. I needed to do something else. I had been told you can't get a teaching job without an MFA. And at that point, I had published like 3 books.
Yeah.
So I got into a low residency MFA at Vermont. And while there, I applied for jobs, did my interview for the Virginia Tech job from Vermont,
Okay.
got the job, decided to finish the MFA in case I ever needed it. So I don't have an undergraduate degree, I have an MFA. And the only time it served any purpose was when I went to work at Purdue. They required a terminal degree. Otherwise, it served no purpose.
Did you workshop your poems there?
And I hated it.
Oh, it was just, okay, that was my question.
I absolutely
I can't
hated it.
picture that.
Because I was writing books. The idea of going
You had already written.
through that, I did not like the experience. The people who ran them were great. People like David Wojan,
Oh, yeah.
very smart, very nice man, but I could not stand the experience.
Fascinating.
I can hear them without, I feel bad for you having to.
Okay, I hate to go back to the hating the poems thing, but that struck me so hard because I was just telling my friend yesterday I hate my poems. But here's the problem with that is I feel like a lot of people write their poetry and feel like they're perfect and wonderful, and they submit those poems and get them published, and then their, no offense to them, bad poems are out there in the world, and the people who have the good poems have hidden them in their drawer. Do you see what I'm saying? So I'm just curious how you bring yourself to put them out into the world, to do these readings, to put them in a book that's in black and white forever, if you hate them.
And to me, that's where the real contradiction is. It's like, well, if you hate your poem so much, why don't you just shut the hell up and go away?
Burn them.
I never wrote, again, this may seem contradictory, I never wrote for myself. This was never about therapy. This was never about, I always felt this as an attempt to reach others, to communicate with other people. So it seems natural to want that to get out. However bad or flawed I feel they are, I think a lot of us who do this, I mean, the real contradiction of doing something like this, you take someone who is probably most comfortable alone in a room, and they get up in front of a group of people. And what that says to me is we are people who really, really want to connect with other people. We just tend to be really private and not that good at social shit. This is a bridge between those spaces, between feeling really, really comfortable alone in a room and wanting to connect with people. So, as flawed as these are, I'm not so good at the social stuff, not at all. I'm better at this than I am at that. So.
Amazing answer, thank you.
Sure. Amazing.
Do you ever share your poem and get some feedback, right after you write it, like with Eve, or
With Eve.
you have a
Yeah.
buddy?
With Eve and with Corinne.
Okay, that's cool.
It's kind of
Right
nice. Sometimes.
That's great.
Not always. And a lot of this stuff it'll just sit around for a while before I show it to folks. But I never had a group of people that other than Eve. Eve has looked at stuff the whole time we've been together, which is, we're not quite sure.
That's awesome.
Almost 40 years.
Yeah, that's great.
I've never had a group of people that I shared work with.
So you said that you write every day, and you might put 2 years of work in a book. That would be like 700 poems.
Most of it gets pitched.
What?
Most of my poems they're just thrown out.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you are making a distinction.
Oh, God, yes. Yeah. Yeah. It's, which do
are,
I hate least?
Are you surprised sometimes at how people do react to your poems, and are they not the ones you would expect them to respond to, or is it surprising, or how do you feel
Both.
about that?
I'm shocked to realize every time I learn that anyone is aware I do this, I'm shocked. We're very private, so I'm not hanging out in literary circle. I'm not really hanging out in any circle. So it kind of shocks me to ever realize that anyone notices this stuff. And it can be really cool when someone, picks out a particular poem. Something I thought no one saw, no one had any interest in. Yeah.
As an extension of that question, does it flatter you, or anything how does it affect you when you learn that your poems are being read at weddings or funerals, or lovers are reading it to each other, etc.? Does that do anything to you?
Makes me feel good and embarrassed. Yeah, it's a weird combination of flattery and embarrassment.
I'm telling you, it's happening out there.
Well, we're going to have a chance to talk to Bob across the quad to the bookstore, but I want to say that I have never had a poet as frank and honest and open to tell him he has a lack of ego energy, and that's why he can write poem after poem after poem. And today we saw that. And I'm so grateful how lucky these people are to see the inside of a writer's heart so honestly and frankly. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Bob.
Thank you.
So we'll lead you all to the bookstore, and if you follow us, you'll have a good time. I should have warned you. How adorable is she?
Mom, I got a big shirt for you.
Oh my God, thank you.
Oh,
Thank
how old
you.
are you?
5?
Oh my goodness, you're not 15?
No.
Oh, I love you.
Thank you so much, Anna.